Islands near the Turkish coast have become known as hotspots where refugees live in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. More than a third are children, mostly without access to education.
In Mexico, this tent camp is feet from the U.S. border, but worlds away.
Thousands of asylum seekers have been living in inhumane conditions in Greece. Over
30 million refugees in the world, and half of them are children. There have not been this many refugees since World War II.
We are a world on the move. We know that people have to flee for their own lives, for better opportunities, and it's not easy.
Angels Unaware is a statement about the need to visualize human mobility.
Timothy Schmalz is a very faith-filled artist. He was inspired by the scripture Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, that says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for oftentimes you're entertaining angels unawares."
Look at these expressions here. It's unbelievable. That has to go on the sculpture. I hope that the sculpture, at least something will resonate with a person that comes by and sees it.
I saw myself in but a few of those faces. I saw my story.
I hope that that statue will stir up in people's hearts the desire to be merciful. For us, those refugees are those angels. Pope Francis has made it one of the principal themes of his pontificate to arouse the conscience of humanity and see humanity through the eyes of God and see them with God's love and mercy.
The first thing that he does after being named Pope, he goes to Lampedusa. He washes the feet of migrants and refugees.
Siamo una società che ha dimenticato l'esperienza del piangere, del patire con. La globalizzazione dell'indifferenza. That
sign is a statement. It's another symbol that he's trying to mark. So I think that in a way, Angels Unawares as a sculpture is really a sign to say, this is an important issue for us. And it's a plea to say human mobility needs to happen in safer ways, in ways in which people are not put in vulnerable situations.
Pope Francis developed a new department, migrants and refugees. During this time, I was going back and forth visiting Rome. I was asked by Cardinal to create a sculpture on the idea of migrants and refugees. And I remember I said to him, I already have quite a bit of sculptures out there, and a lot of them fit within the idea of the migrants and the refugees. But he insisted, no, please, if you can, do a new sculpture specifically on the theme of migrants and refugees. And when you get a request like that, you drop everything and you start working on it. So I came back to my studio here in Canada. I have this huge task, and I was listening to the Bible like I usually do, but then the whole idea, it's almost like it dropped down from heaven on my lap. Hebrews 13:2, be welcoming to strangers, many have entertained angels unawares. The first time I heard that, really heard it, must have been the 100th time I heard it with my ears, but my heart, one time, it just became a part of me, and I was like, oh my God, I have to do something with this. Quite frankly, I had to drop all my other projects and I started working on a little model just to get the three-dimensional aspect of it and to kind of get the feel about how it would look as a big sculpture. The initial design of St. Peter's Square was to be a visual welcoming. There's 140 saints on top of the colonnade that reaches out, almost as if it's two outstretched arms. Knowing that the sculpture was going to be installed in St. Peter's Square, I thought if I could have the same number of migrants on this one shared raft, and within this, an angel, but you can only see the angel's wings because of the crowd. Visually, the angel wings become all the figure's wings, and it suggests that all humanity is sacred. The beginnings of the church, they used symbols because people were illiterate. Nowadays, not because they can't read or write, people are illiterate because of lack of time and bombardment of all the different social media. Our culture right now has changed. We're no longer an overtly Christian culture like we were a century ago. And we're at a very, very stressful point. We have to evangelize a population that is thinking that our faith is obsolete. I start sculpting at 4 in the morning, and I've been doing this for decades. I wouldn't have that energy if it wasn't for the belief that a sculpture, a piece of artwork, can convert someone. If I do my job well, in a glance, people will benefit from that message.
Catholics are called to respond to the globalization of indifference by being countercultural. And the best way for us to be motivated to do that is read the Gospels. It is in the refugee, in the one who is hungry, in the person who is thirsty, in the person who is struggling, that we see the face of Christ.
The church over the centuries has always understood hospitality is really part and parcel of the Judeo-Christian ethic.
What we call the Judeo-Christian tradition started with an act of hospitality. You may recall from the book of Genesis, Abraham was pitching his tent near the oaks of Mamre, and 3 strangers came along, one of whom was the Lord. And he asked them to stay and have something to eat and wash their feet, and they promised him that he'd have a son. That was the first act of hospitality, and it's one that we Christians have carried on as well.
In the Gospels, there are so many parables where Jesus talks about indifference, not the sins that we'd commit, but the sins of omission. Like Lazarus and the rich man, where the rich man was blind to the beggar on his doorstep. Jesus' account of the Last Supper, where he says, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was a stranger.
Many times American Catholics have a misunderstanding of the immigrant journey because they may have been here for so many generations that they may be a little disconnected from their own immigrant journey. Everything that their family and their ancestors lived through in their immigrant journey are the same issues and the same concerns that new immigrants arriving to this country are going through today.
I think that immigration is a hot topic in the United States today for a couple of reasons. One of them is that we want to guard our own resources and not share them with other people, or keep out competition for jobs that we ourselves want to hold.
The United States is a country of migration. It's been ups and downs of keeping the door open or closing the door. The first restrictions that we saw on migration were back before the beginning of the 19th century against the Chinese immigrants, Chinese Exclusion Act. And then we saw the great migration, basically after 1900, from Italy, from Eastern Europe. The doors were open until 1921, when we had restrictive quotas put on Southern and Eastern Europeans, letting the Northern Europeans in and keeping the others out. And then you saw some more post-war anti-immigrant laws passed. 1965 was a watershed moment, because then we kind of equalized the ability of migrants to come to the United States. Every country in the world theoretically had a 20,000 person cap annually. It wasn't always reached, but it changed things dramatically. Then unfortunately, we saw that after 9/11, another breakdown of confidence in our immigration policy happened, and again we became very restrictive. We're a country of migrants, but it doesn't mean we've always welcomed them.
The Hispanic presence in the United States is the oldest Catholic presence. Today, Latinos are everywhere in our faith communities. More than 4,500 parishes in the United States of America have services in Spanish.
Dolores Mission means a lot to the city of Los Angeles. I think Dolores Mission is a place that has always asked that question, what does it mean to be a faithful Catholic in this particular community? The parish community is a mix of Mexican-American and largely Central American migrants.
Sometimes we get those calls at the Archdiocese asking where somebody can go for help, where somebody can go for assistance. And the Dolores Mission is one of the first places that we offer up, knowing it always has its doors welcome to people.
My name is Fabiola Flores Pisaña. I'm from Durango, Mexico. What brought me to the US was my parents' dream for a better life for myself and for my younger brother. They saw the struggle of what was going on back in Mexico, and they thought it would be best to come here and change our lifestyle. My father was brought in a truck stuffed at the bottom. He tells me stories about how difficult it was to breathe, how difficult it was to just make the journey over, how he almost passed away. That's not an easy thing to do. And my mother had to be separated from me. We traveled separately with different identities, and so there were a lot of risks, but they knew that the reward was even better.
Para mí, crecer en Puebla fue un poquito estresante porque pues allí el trabajo es escaso y el dinero es poco, y es por eso que a la edad de 14 años yo emigré a este país. Yo vine a este país para ayudar a mis padres. Trabajaba cuidando niños al principio y todo lo que ganaba se lo mandaba a mis padres porque ellos se quedaron con otros 5 hermanos míos en mi pueblo. Para mí la Misión Dolores significa mi casa, mi hogar, porque sé que siempre he tenido apoyo de parte de todos, que siempre están pendientes de sus feligreses, cómo están, y siempre buscan manera de ayudarlos.
There is a famous poet once said, "No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark." You don't leave everything behind, your life, your memories, everything you worked for, your connection, your society, everything, and you just go to start over somewhere else. My name is Omar Al-Muqdar. I'm a Syrian-American journalist and filmmaker. I've been in the United States since June 2012. I studied political sciences at Damascus University, but my life took a sharp turn into the journalism field, where I thought that would provide me with an opportunity to improve the situation in Syria. I spent 3 years in jail as a result of a series of articles I wrote criticizing the Syrian regime. When the Syrian uprising in 2011 took place in southern Syria and Daraa, I was one of the early voices that was speaking out against the Syrian regime and its atrocities that be committed against the Syrian people and against the peaceful demonstrations in the streets. I was on the target list. So a lot of my colleagues and my friends, they say, "Hey, Omar, you have to leave." So I took the risk and I left the country. I was at the Syrian-Turkish border, leaving everything behind, everything that I worked for my entire life behind me. And now I'm here on the Syrian-Turkish border with nothing. So that's where it occurs to me that what it really means, how it feels to be a refugee. It was a really tough feeling. I arrived to Turkey in 2012. That's when I was introduced to ICMC, International Catholic Migration Commission, who decided to help me out throughout the United Nations and gave me the opportunity to come to the United States and start my life over. I was really active with the Catholic organizations here in America. They are the ones who's doing the heavy lifting. Jesus Christ was himself a refugee once, and he always insisted on welcoming refugees. I consider myself now as a part of this country. I'm American, a proud American. I mean, everyone here came from someplace else. This is what makes America unique and one of its kind. I hope people will come to realize helping others it's really a noble thing to do. It's a very human thing, and these people need help. We must be there for them, because who knows, anyone can become a refugee anytime.
Torej, sem Tamino Petelinšek iz Slovenije. Živim v vasici imenovani Kompolje v Dobrepolju. Sem mož in oče 4 otrokom. Kot fotograf se preživljam že dobrih 24 let. Za vojno smo izvedeli praktično isti dan, ko se je začela. Ukrajina leži okoli 600 km od Slovenije in zato smo se posebno še počutili prizadete. Ko sem opazovala, kako so hodili begunci preko meje na Poljsko, sem se spomnil podobnih prizorov, kakršne sem opazoval na starih fotografijah iz leta 1945, kako so slovenski begunci odhajali na pot, ko so bežali pred komunisti. Praktično me je stisnilo pri srcu, ker sem videl, da v bistvu se zgodovina ponavlja. Sestradane in udrta lica in praktično me je zelo stisnilo. No. V teh časih socialnih omrežij, kot vsaka platforma ponuja različne filtre in montaže, ljudje težko zaupamo že praktično fotografijam, ki jih vidimo. Ne. Moj princip fotografije je dogodka, ne manipuliram.
Spomnim se slike, ki jo je naredil Tamino, bilo je to na ukrajinsko-poljski meji. Mislim, da mama vozi otroka v vozičku, zunaj je bila zima in mama v 21. stoletju hodi zunaj po mrzlem. To je zame osebno nesprejemljivo in me tudi to zelo pretreslo. Ja.
In smo se nekako začeli pogovarjati, kako bi pomagali nasploh Ukrajincem.
Takrat sem sam sebe vprašal, kaj se bi dogajalo z mano, z mojo družino, da bi moral jaz zbežati iz države. To je za mene bilo zelo težko.
Prepričan sem, da če izkazuješ svojo krščansko držo le v cerkvi, med praznovanji, da to ni dovolj. Akcija je bistvena in dejanja so bistvena. Pot se je zdela na začetku zelo nevarna in tvegana, ampak sem to organiziral predvsem iz lastnega čuta do sočloveka, ki je v stiski, ki potrebuje pomoč kogarkoli. Mi pa smo želeli, da bi naši begunci bili obravnavani tako kot naši gostje, kot naši prijatelji. Zato smo bili zelo srečni, ker se je javilo veliko slovenskih družin že v prvem valu.
Seveda, prvo jim želim, da so one tu sprejete, da se počutijo varne, da so sprejete res z odprtim srcem, da niso pod vplivom nenehnega stresa, nenehnega sovraštva, nenehnega zatiranja človeške dostojanstvenosti. In jim res želim, da bi se vrnile na svoje domove.
Ko sem organiziral te avtobuse, najbolj začutil prisotnost Svetega Duha pri tej zgodbi. Zato imam občutek, da je Bog nekako tu vodil ta projekt. In ob vsaki oviri, ki je padla, te uresničitve mi je še bolj pokazala, da je nekako Bog z nami.
Vi invito a avvicinarvi a quel monumento là, dove c'è il Cardinal Cerny, la barca con i migranti, e a soffermarvi sullo sguardo di quelle persone e cogliere in quello sguardo la speranza che oggi ha ogni migrante di ricominciare a vivere. Andate là, vedete quel monumento.
This is the first sculpture in over 400 years that has been placed in St. Peter's Square permanently. The last one was a Bernini, and this is really significant to have something new that's very reflective of today's world and many individuals who can see themselves in the sculpture.
The fact that this particular sculpture is in Rome, in many ways, receives a teaching character for the entire church. Whether you have met an immigrant or not, whether you have been exposed to the immigrant experience or not, we all have to care about these dynamics that the sculpture evokes.
All of the figures on the piece are real migrants and refugees. So it's hard to look at the sculpture without seeing yourself shoulder to shoulder with someone else from a completely different background and also a completely different period of time together on this one ship. There's such a thing as welcoming, but then to be acknowledged in artwork, that's, I think, an accomplishment, and I think that's a great addition to have in St. Peter's Square, a square that was designed to welcome people from all over the world.
The statue Angels Unawares that we have on our own campus is an exact replica, a second casting of a statue that Pope Francis had commissioned for St. Peter's Square, and we're delivering a message that we don't think will ever come down. It's one that will be timeless, and it's a message that people need to hear nowadays. The statue itself has gone on its own pilgrimage, so it kind of replicates the notion that it embodies.
To host it here in Boston, in a city where thousands of immigrants make their home, is truly an honor. I think it represents lasting commitment that Boston College has to migrants and also to educating people from diverse backgrounds.
Art always teaches us a lot of things. Artists know things other people don't know. They have a spiritual sensitivity. This sculpture, I think, is very important. It's made the tour of the United States. It's a symbolic movement of the migrating statue, in a sense, to let people know that migrants are really part and parcel of the world and also of our country.
When I looked at the statue, I wanted to cry. I remember laying in that dark room, holding my brother, trying not to fall asleep because I wasn't sure what the next moment would look like, where I would go. And that's what I see in their faces. I look back at my immigration story and I see now how resilient it made me and how strong it made me, how much more confident it made me. And I knew somebody was looking over us.
It really reminds us of the history of migrants. We can see it in the Bible and also in the Gospels. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were also migrants. It is a beautiful example of how we all are called to love one another.
As an immigrant myself, I feel represented in that sculpture. And as a Catholic, I believe that hospitality is central to who we are. We are a church that's already established, but it's also an immigrant church. If we continue to recognize that and if we continue to respond, then we're living out our mission.
The statue, Angels Unawares, is a way of living out the evangelical commission that Pope Francis preached, that we should be preaching the gospel not just to the people who show up in church, but to the people who aren't there, the people who are on the margins. For us as Catholics, members of the same church, we're following his example.
This is a beautiful reminder of who we are as a church in the United States of America and who we are as a world. By looking at this sculpture, I think we are all drawn into this moment in time, this moment in history in which we are reminded of what it means to be human. And then respond. And I hope that the response is one of welcoming and one of being challenged.
One of the fascinating things throughout the piece that I really enjoyed was putting the hope in the positive, because it's not a Holocaust memorial. It's not a tombstone. It's a complex piece that shows the positive as well as the negative. For some, it becomes a beautiful experience, and it becomes an inferno for others. I can't think of a better occupation for artwork to take on. And for me, being a sculptor, I can't think of anything better for me to do other than to pursue this idea of creating meaningful pieces of artwork that will inspire people to become more spiritual and hopefully become closer to God.